All right, let's do this. This is my podcast. It has no name. Not yet. Maybe someday. I've been thinking of maybe the drunk cast. That has to be taken, right? Someone has to be doing a drunk cast, and if not, why the fuck not? I've been thinking about the Chuck cast. Equally dumb. Hey, what do you want? I mean, you're here. You're listening to me. First off, who am I? Why the fuck do you want to know who I am? Don't be rude. That's rude. You don't need to know who I am. Who am I? My name is Chuck Rice. Wrote a fair number of role-playing games. If you own a role-playing game with blood in the title, there's at least a 33.33% chance that I wrote it. Blood and Fists, Blood and Guts, Blood and Space. Did I say that one already? Whatever. I said drunk cast, right? Okay. So now I did those games for a company called RPGObjects, a very, very cool indie RPG house that is still selling products. I don't know if they're making new products anymore. I highly suggest you check them out. Not the least of which because a lot of those games with blood in the title that I made for them are still around. And then I kind of ran my own shop for a while, a place called Vigilance Press. Did mostly supers stuff and old school fantasy there, which are two of my favorite passions. And at a certain point, ran into an old buddy of mine, Dan Decker. We went to college together, and he was working at Mayfair Games, a company that, when I was a younger man, published role-playing games, but these days they are a board game publisher. They were looking for a marketing person, and I interviewed, and they were like, hey, you own your own company. That's potentially not cool. Conflict of interest. So I had been unhappy with how much time I was spending running Vigilance Press as opposed to writing for Vigilance Press. And so I kind of independently of that decided to sell it. Talked to James Dossie about that. Super cool guy. He wound up buying it. I went back to Mayfair Games again through my friend Dan and said, in case this is the reason that you didn't hire me, I don't own a company anymore. And whether or not that was the reason that they didn't hire me to begin with, they did hire me the second time around. And so I've worked there since 2011. I guess here, I should say. There, here, whatever. Pronouns, right? Kind of got the itch again. Kind of had been converted to the zombie apocalypse by my friend Dan, and decided to make a game called AZ After Zombies, which is out now. It's on drive-through RPGNow. It's very cool. It's been reviewed very well. Current average review score 4.9 out of 5, which is better than if it was 4.9 out of 100, I suppose. Now for AZ, I designed my own system from the ground up. I'd never done that before. That was a very fun, interesting process. A good friend of mine, Darren Drader, who is a fantastic writer and game designer, kind of helped me do some development work, kind of helped me knock the kinks out of it, some of them. Did a lot of playtesting, worked on it for about 2 years, I want to say. And Jeremy Peterson, also huge help, editor, great editor, done some adventures for it. Now, again, like I said, I'd never designed a system before, and so I definitely had in mind when I designed it that I wanted it to be able to do more than one thing. And currently I'm slowly, very slowly, much more slowly than I'd like, converting the system to science fiction. It's going to be the home of my Prometheus setting, which has been out in a few products from RPGObjects. Chris Davis was very cool, allowed me to use the setting, bring it back once again under this new system. We'll talk about that at another date. Now, I mentioned drunk cast before. I'm not actually drunk. Hopefully you can tell that. Maybe not. Who knows? What I am currently drinking is a lovely concoction. Svedka vodka, Gosling's ginger beer. So I guess that's a Moscow Mule, although I'm not drinking it out of a metal cup. I don't know. Does it still count? I drink. You decide. But enough about that. With the world's most abrupt segue. Is it even a segue if it's abrupt? Isn't the point of a segue for it not to be abrupt? I digress. So that's who I am. So what am I playing? Because I'm assuming if you're listening to this at all, and if you haven't run screaming away from the sound of my voice yet. So my tabletop group is on a bit of a hiatus. We were playing 2nd edition AD&D. I guess we still are playing. I haven't called it off yet. That's the thing that happens. Life got in the way. I travel a fair amount for work. Dan, who's in my group, travels more. Birthdays, holidays, blah, blah, blah. It'll probably be January before we start up again. It's in my homebrew world, which is nothing spectacular. I did kind of an interesting spin on it as a Vigilance Press product, which is, I believe, still out there, called The World of Arcara, using a kind of stock art map. I think the most interesting thing about the world as a world is its gods. I don't think there's anything super amazing. It's a world I created when I was in high school, is when I started running it. So, you know, it's a D&D world. You've played D&D. You know what's up. This campaign has been ongoing for about 20 years in linear time, Deep Space Nine reference, which is to say we have not been playing it for 20 years. I moved away for about 10 of those years. It's a campaign that's been around since 2nd edition was still a thing, so actually that might be more than 20 years at this point. My God. Time flies. Don't get old, kids. I don't recommend it. When we were playing last, I was running, sort of, the classic Lich Lord's Adventure, which is one of those roll aids products that Mayfair used to make. Kind of inside. Anytime I hear about, during the D20 era, people talking about the D20 glut, third-party products, all that interesting bullshit. By the way, D20 glut, this is a whole separate topic, but that's one of the dumbest ideas people ever came up with. There never was a glut. And especially there wasn't a glut because back in the 1st ed, 2nd ed days, there were all kinds of third-party products. Roll aids, the Complete Alchemist, Thieves' World was done for, I don't know, about 8,000 different systems, I want to say. Judges Guild, City State of the Invincible Overlord. White Dwarf used to do awesome D&D stuff. That was the first place I ever saw the concept of a ninja as a D&D class was in White Dwarf magazine. But anyway, I'm sort of running the adventure, which is to say I'm not really running the adventure. I'm using the incredibly evil, incredibly broken, incredibly dastardly uses for wishes that are in the module and the Lich Lords themselves, but I'm not actually running them through it. The Lich Lords are kind of running around trying to take over the world. The players are encountering them. I think they've killed 3 of them. There are 2 left. It's gone fairly well for them. They've had 1 permanent player death. One of the Lich Lords had the party in a bad way, and a player broke a Staff of the Magi, which, as you may or may not know, either teleports you to another plane in the midst of the explosion, or disintegrates you, and in this case, it disintegrated him. First permanent player death in the entire campaign, so that was kind of an amazing thing. Although, I'm kind of a Care Bear DM, so, you know, it is what it is. So we're going to get back to that eventually, unless I decide to put it on hiatus so I can ruthlessly force my playtesters to... You see what I did there? My players to playtest Prometheus, which is lurching toward the finish line, like I don't know, a beast from the desert on a pale horse. Is that the Bible I'm butchering? I'm sorry. I apologize to anyone whose core belief system I just ruined. So outside of the tabletop sphere, I am playing Civ 6, Civilization 6, Sid Meier's Civilization 6. How many times can I say that? Do you guys think I'm a viral marketer yet? Getting paid to just say Civilization 6 as many times as possible, which is the best launch Civilization game since Civ 2. And if you are familiar with the Civilization games, you realize the dire import of what I just said. It's a better game at launch than Civilization 4 was. It's a way better game at launch than Civilization 5 was. It crushes launch Civilization 5 like a fucking grape, an overripe grape at that. And yeah, it's great. Like all Civ games, it's going to get even better. I think as it matures, I mean, it's unless they botch it horribly, once it gets the requisite 2 major expansions under its belt, Civ games for the longest time, and by the longest time I mean since I want to say Civ 4, have had a war-focused expansion and a diplomacy-focused expansion. So once it gets both of those out, I think it'll be the best Civ game ever, given that it's the best launch game. So Civ 5, the expansions were downright necessary because vanilla launch Civ 5 had issues. It was a really good game by the time they got both the expansions out, so I can't help but think that by the time Civ 6 gets its expansions out, it's going to be amazing. I'm playing the heck out of it. I think I'm already at something like 160 hours, which is kind of awesome. Shows me to be a productive person, and in no way explains why the Prometheus tabletop game has stalled. Pause for drink. I'm also playing Diablo 3, another game that is now where it needs to be. Had a very rough start. They had the real money auction house, which was a disaster debacle. In case you don't know, a disaster debacle is a cross between a disaster and a debacle. It's a really, really not good thing. BlizzCon kind of got me back into Diablo 3. The announcement that the Necromancer, my beloved Diablo 2 Necromancer, is coming back, along with the original that started it all, Diablo dungeon. Old Tristram going to be back in effect in January. Those 2 announcements, super awesome. Got me back in playing a Crusader for the first time. Played a Barbarian. I've played a Sorceress all the way through to max level, but now I'm in the expansion territory. The act added, well, I guess I have the expansion installed because I'm playing the Crusader. He was not an original character class. So yeah, Diablo 3 is awesome. I'm going to, beat the game again, get up to 70, bump the difficulty up to Torment, do the bounties, do all that awesome stuff. Diablo 3 has gotten really, really good as it matured. I've played around with the seasons some. There's a new season going on. If you don't play Diablo, this is all meaningless to you. Although, if, again, you're listening to this, you would probably love the fuck out of Diablo as long as you have no one in your life to distract you from entering the cocoon and letting the world around you melt away, which becomes more and more attractive as time goes on. We're not going to talk about that. This is going to be a politics-free zone if I have anything to say about it. And given that I'm a lone man talking into a microphone, I have everything to say about it. So yeah, that's what I'm playing. I've been getting the itch lately. I've been going back to Prometheus. It is getting close. For those of you who don't know, Prometheus is set in the future. There are Earth is kind of ecologically shattered. There are colonies around Jupiter, on the various moons of Jupiter, and in the asteroid belt that are in the process of breaking away from a tyrannical Earth, which has been, in addition to being ecologically shattered has been taken over by corporations. So, it's a fictional future that we can't possibly imagine, a world run by corporations with a shitty environment. I can't imagine what that Earth would look like. But then it has other things that do not exist, like sadly, like Jupiter colonies. They are in the process of they're gonna break away from Earth. I haven't. The game isn't going to tell you where to set your campaign. You could set it during the Civil War between Earth and the Jovian colonies. You could set it after. I'm kind of leaning toward my game being set after because I've ran games set during the Civil War before. But I'm a big believer in sandbox games. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not the boss of you. Run your game however the fuck you want. The game it's coming along. For those of you familiar with AZ, well, and even if you're not familiar with AZ, let me break down for you kind of the basics of the system. It's a percentile based system. It's a very old school system. I like games like that. When I say old school, one of the things I mean is it's very crunchy, lots of ability scores, lots of tables. Character generation takes a while, although I think the game is simple to play, but character generation takes a while. So old school in that sense. It's like a lot of those games that I like. GURPS, Champions, old school D&D, although old school D&D character generation doesn't take a long time, but you spend a lot of time futzing around with your character, micromanaging it. Pause for a drink. So it's a percentile based system where you're rolling under. If you have a skill, it's at its governing ability score. So if you have pistols and your combat is 50, then you have a 50% chance to hit. If you don't have the skill, it's at half its governing ability. So if you don't have pistols and you pick up a pistol and your combat ability is 50, then you're going to have a 25% chance to hit. Prometheus has a lot of interesting character options that were not in the zombie game, because the concept of the zombie game is that it was a survival game where, pudgy assholes like me are thrust into a survival situation and are not super great at it. Prometheus adds things like you've got cloning, genetic engineering, space drones, gotta have space drones, lasers, some exotic weapons. Obviously, the old school weapons are still around. I think a slug thrower would still kill people just as good in the future as it does now. There are a lot of alien ruins around the solar system in the Prometheus setting. I'm not one of those guys who believes in the whole ancient astronauts thing, but I like it as an idea. So it's in the setting. I guess I'm just trying to draw that line. There are alien ruins on Mars, perhaps alien contact between aliens and the Egyptians in the past of the setting. I'm just trying to let you know I don't actually think in the real world, whatever the hell that means, that Beyonce is a Illuminati lizard person. So it's coming along. I need to get off my ass, metaphorically speaking. And metaphorically because I don't want to write standing up. I don't want to be that standing desk asshole. So when I say get up off my ass, I'm going to be writing, which means I'm going to be on my ass because I'm going to be sitting down. Anyway, I digress again. It's pretty close. I hope to start playtesting it around the first of the year, which means it'll be a year. I'll start playtesting it a year after AZ came out, which means it'll probably come out about 18 months after AZ. Seems kind of crazy to think of it being that close, although 18 months is not super close, but I have had a full-time job the whole time and all of this vodka to drink. It's not going to drink itself. And if you find yourself wondering why I'm talking into this microphone right now, this is kind of a thing I'm doing to help motivate me. I want to document the home stretch. I'm going to talk about Prometheus as I go along. You can kind of consider this to be design diary number 1. Yes, we have finally gotten to the purpose of this thing, whatever it is, that doesn't even technically have a name yet. Anyway, And along the way, I think I'm going to rope in some friends of mine to talk about game design, and maybe, some people who are familiar with AZ to talk about Prometheus. I might even get some of my playtesters in at a certain point. So I hope you've enjoyed my babbling relatively coherently into a microphone, and I hope you'll join me again. Have a good night.